When you say attack, who are we talking about?
I call them Davos, and I've been calling them Davos for 8 years.
They've been acting politically. It's almost as if they've been acting against the current Trump administration.
Not at all.
You think Powell is playing ball?
Yeah. I think Powell is part of it.
Japan seems to be melting down completely.
Not be the financial system, be the collateral asset of it. Powell's Humphrey Hawkins testimonies. He said things like, there's room in the world for more than one reserve currency.
I remember that.
He doesn't have any antipathy to Bitcoin. There's a reason for that. In the long run, Trump wants Powell to lower rates. Powell's not going to lower rates until...
Interesting.
It's part of the plan, and I think that the Trump-Powell fight is capable. And I have thought this for a long time, because it goes back to my original argument. Trump is not wrong about any of this shit. Like, not any of it. And so the problem for Bitcoiners is they become so focused on...
I'm loving this conversation. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Simply Bitcoin IRL. Today, we have a very special guest. Big fan of his work. We have Tom Luongo joining us. Tom, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for the invite, and let's grip it and rip it, as my friend Dave Collin likes to say.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I've been noticing is it seems like the bond market is going nuts. There was a Yahoo Finance article that I read, which is not surprising at all. But the headline is, why is the Fed quietly buying billions in bonds and hoping nobody notices? And then Japan seems to be melting down completely. How big of a concern is this?
Well, it's a good question as to what Yahoo considers buying. I have not seen the article that you're talking about. I tend to have a dim view of anything legacy media when it comes to U.S. finances and U.S. bond market, especially in the light of the tariff tantrum from last month, which was clearly an operation by our European partners to destroy the SOFR strip trade, or whatever you want to call it. And now, what a shock. We had, 2 days after Moody's finally decides that the United States fiscal position is just not, sustainable. Like, oh, wow, you just finally figured this out on a Friday. And then we have everybody on Monday morning coordinating an effort to remind everyone that, oh, the yen carry trade's the problem now. As far as I'm concerned, this is the next phase of the attack on the U.S. bond market by, again, as always, primarily our European partners. We'll have prima facie evidence on this if I'm correct about this. And I don't know that I'm correct, but I do believe I am right about this. We'll know when we get next month's TIC report and we see if the Europeans dropped across the board. That includes Canada, includes the British Virgin Islands, includes the Caymans and all of that. When you talk about what Europe means in terms of ownership of U.S. treasuries, I almost lump Singapore and Hong Kong into that as well at this point, to be honest with you. But it's probably stretching the definition a little far. If they dumped a couple $100 billion in April, which is what the June TIC report could, I am expecting to see. If I'm wrong about that, that's fine, but we'll see what happens. Then we'll know what's going on. And this is yet another version of that same attack. You have Moody's do the downgrade, and then you start attacking the yen carry trade and force the Japanese bond market into crisis mode, which then blows back on the American bond market in the same duration space, blah, 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 blah. While you then, of course, move and you sell 30s and 10s, and you buy 2s and 1s and 2s in order to create a yield curve inversion and sell a narrative. That's what I think is mostly going on. I've been right about that in the past. I'm just going to assume that that's where we are today.
Interesting. So when you say attack, who is are we talking about the globalists? Are we talking about, who are we talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I call them Davos, and I've been calling them Davos for 8 years, and I'll continue to call them that. But, at the end of the day, we're talking about that consortium of people, globalists, that have a distinctly European odor about them. That, you can call it City of London, you can call it Amsterdam, you can call it whatever you want, you can call it the Rothschilds. I don't really care. Everybody has their version of what they think this reality is. The truth is that it's all of them, right? to some degree or another. And that includes people in the United States. I mean, there are plenty of those people within the U.S. and that crowd. Like I would put Mitt Romney in Bain Capital, for example, and BlackRock. I would consider them part of Davos. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, all the rest of them. You know, that's who's attacking
Gotcha.
the Trump policy of what he's attempting to do to reorganize and recalibrate the entire global economy. And that's where we are. And it's a fight to the death. And I think it's the most important war that's on the table today. It's far more important ultimately Russia, Ukraine, which is an aspect of
As
this.
a proxy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you, by the way. I mean, Trump really represents this, populist, nationalist kind of uprising saying,
Mhm.
enough is enough with this globalist BS. You've essentially sold us a narrative. That narrative hasn't worked out for, the average everyday person. And they're sick of it. And instead of pivoting, they keep doubling down. I mean, the cancellation of elections, specifically the Romanian election was crazy, right? And then we're also being lectured about democracy here, and then not to mention this previous election in the United States. I mean, oh my God, I've never seen that in my entire life, right? The assassination attempts, like I'm just going to leave it at
Oh,
that. But one of the things that
right.
I want to ask you, Tom, is
Mm.
it seems like the Fed has not been they've been acting politically. It's almost as if they've been acting against the current Trump administration.
Not at all.
No,
Nope.
you think
Nope.
Powell is playing ball?
Yeah. I think Powell is part of the plan. And I think that the Trump Powell fight is kayfabe. And I have thought this for a long time because it goes back to my original argument. I don't know, I mean, I haven't been on your show before, but that I remember. And I do a lot of these. So if I have been on your show before and I forgot, well, I apologize. No, we are watching the United States build a completely independent financial architecture, free from influence of City of London, Euroclear, and all the rest of it. And that is a very complicated story at this point. The more I dig into that original insight from 4 years ago, the more I've been able to add data to that. And I don't have the time now in this context to go over all of it. What I can tell you is that some of that story is been told. I did a series of podcasts with Caitlin Long, then Brent Johnson, then Vince Lanchi. We talked about all of this stuff from 3 different perspectives, episodes 213 through 215 of the Gold Coats and Guns podcast, because we go into a lot of depth on all this stuff, the supplemental leverage ratio, the stablecoin bill, like all of it, right? Gold, the bankrupting the LBMA, like all of that stuff. No, the way you beat Europe and the way you beat these people is you have to make their leverage that they want to take offshore dollars and want to lever them up and then use them against us. And they did it for all those years during the LIBOR years. And they did it when they had effectively globalist control of the central banks under the Obama administration with both Bernanke and Yellen and Geithner at Treasury. Now, that world is over. Powell raised interest rates. Powell raised the reverse repo payout rate 5 basis points above the Fed funds rate back in June 2021, draining the world of trillions of dollars of base capital and what I would call global M0. And then since then, what he's done is he's held interest rates high because the higher you hold the Fed funds rate and you hold SOFR by extension, overnight SOFR rates and 3 month and the 3-month SOFR strip, the longer you hold those rates at that level and the higher you hold them, the less leverage that they can employ overseas, because the United States is in control of its interest rates domestically now. That's what SOFR is. We're no longer tied to LIBOR, where if the British banks got in trouble, or if Amsterdam, if ING or Deutsche Bank got in trouble, they could blow out LIBOR and then force a recession on the United States, because our car loans and our credit revolvers and our mortgages were then, just especially the ARMs, were all then tied to LIBOR. If LIBOR blew out, then our stuff blew out, and then our cost of capital rose far above the level of where our natural rate of interest should be. And what we're seeing under SOFR is, oh, look, the United States can handle 4.5%
Yeah.
cost of capital.
And why do you think, and first of all, I've never heard that perspective before, and it's absolutely fascinating. Thank you
Right.
for enlightening me. I speak to a lot of people, and I've never heard that take before, and it's great.
And FYI, again, I made the call. I made the call into the void, and it turned out to be the correct call. And I'm not.
No, I
This is
believe
just
it.
4 years worth of data. Like, we're here. We're
I
in it.
believe it. I believe it.
Yep.
The proof is in the work.
Yo, I want to tell you about the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. I'm talking about bitcoinwell.com. What makes bitcoinwell.com different is that it's a completely non-custodial platform, meaning as soon as you buy Bitcoin and the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. And that perfectly aligns with the Simply Bitcoin ethos of the separation of money and state. Support Bitcoin on-ramps that are self-custody by default. To get started, go to bitcoinwell.com today. It takes 2 to 5 minutes to sign up, and bada bing, bada boom, you're ready to buy Bitcoin.
So your theory essentially is that Powell and Trump are working together to essentially move forward with the MAGA agenda. The MAGA agenda is essentially, America first,
Yes.
nationalistic policies,
Mhm.
and putting the average everyday American before the global elite, so to speak.
Yes.
And I think we've been living in a world for the last multiple decades where the global elite has put themselves above everyone else. And then I think what we're really witnessing, this is not just in the United States, is kind of a populist uprising and saying, you know what?
Yeah.
We don't believe you guys anymore. What you guys are saying over at Davos, we're not buying it. I actually want to own something and be happy. What are you talking about? Right.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what you're making the case for. Now, that's really interesting because, Tom, like from my perspective, of course, I have to talk about Bitcoin every single day. It seems like Powell was helping Biden as Kamala, get reelected. And it seems like Powell, essentially, you can make the case that he's actually sabotaging the Trump administration by keeping the rates high. And then by keeping the rates high, not allowing the MAGA agenda to be rolled out. And you're basically saying, no, that's not at all happening.
No. Okay. If Powell, I think Trump is really skilled at saying a whole lot of crap that is not true. And he's very good at it. And he's very good at selling a lie. He's very good at it. And I love him for it because he's better at that than I am, because I don't lie very well. As a matter of fact, I have such a guilty face when playing any kind of poker or bluffing that I could be telling the truth, and everybody looking at me will be, and then oh my God, he's lying, and then I turn out to be telling the truth. This is how I used to. Never mind. So I used to roll my wife and my friends in political games that way all the time, and they just hate playing against me because I always look guilty. But if Powell wanted Kamala Harris to get elected, Powell would have started cutting interest rates in March of last year, not September. What he did in September by cutting 50 basis points is he told everybody, I held off this long and things are actually a little worse than they actually are. And we need to elect Trump because they're so freaking bad. Okay. And that was my take then. I was on 1,000 podcasts doing it. I wrote about it. I talked about it. I made it, and I was right. Monetary policy takes 6 to 9 months to translate into economic activity. So the argument that we need lower interest rates by having the central bank push the rates lower, it sounds like it should be what Trump wants. And it is, in effect, what Trump wants. What Trump is, and Besant, and I think Scott Besant, or Besant, I can never get his name right, is the guy to listen to here. Two things. That argument that Powell is like not on our side would be valid if Besson didn't let everybody know that they have lunch every Monday.
Gotcha.
What do you think they're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So we have a Treasury Secretary and a Fed chairman that are both nationalists. We've never had that before. Under Trump's first term, we had a nationalist Fed chairman and a traitorous, Trump's first term. I'm not sure about Steve Mnuchin, but I'll say this. While Powell was at the Fed and Yellen was the Treasury Secretary, they were clearly at odds. They didn't speak to each other. They were implementing policies that were completely against each other. She did everything imaginable to try and bail out her counterpart over the ECB, the famous neck scarf wearing lawyer named Christine Lagarde. Now you have Powell having to both play politics, but continue to look like he's not playing politics. So the Fed's independence cannot be overtly undermined. So what does Trump go out and do? And again, this is going to sound like I'm just making shit up, but in the long run, Trump wants Powell to lower rates, but Powell's not going to lower rates until other things are taken care of to ensure that the fiscal side of the equation has been solved. So Trump saying what he says about Powell is designed to set the ball in motion for when Powell does cut rates, and then he can go, no, Jay, you're doing great work. Because he's got inflation numbers that tell him he does not need to cut. He still can't really cut rates yet. He's still got unemployment that says he shouldn't cut rates yet. And Europe is screaming about the cost of capital because they need dollars. They're in there every week, bellying up to they've been going up, bellying up to the Fed, doing a walk of shame every week, going up to the overnight window and asking for overnight repo window, asking for money. Now, as Trump and Besson have changed the rules of the game, everybody's moving away from gold. They're moving away from dollars, and they're trying to shore up their balance sheets with gold and other assets. But I don't want to get too lost in this. Trump does that. Powell then can't respond to that by cutting rates. Otherwise, he looks like he's just Trump's tool. Mm-hmm. So he has to hold rates a little longer at 4.5% than he could. If Trump had kept his mouth shut, Powell probably would have already cut a quarter point. From the beginning last year, as trying to handicap the election, I said this will sound counterintuitive, but if Kamala Harris wins, Powell will hold rates higher longer in order to continue to make it hard for her to spend the deficit spend like crazy, and he'll cut more aggressively under Trump, with Trump coming, because he'll want to support the policy as long as Trump can get the fiscal restraint in place. That was my argument then. What do we see from the Democrats and what do we see from Davos? Putting up every roadblock imaginable, fighting the financial and political war the exact same way that Zelensky is fighting over in Ukraine by not giving an inch and fighting for every scrap of territory. Like, while you spend countless amounts, untold amounts of physical capital, men, material, time, political capital, all of it, money, all of it. What are we doing? What are they doing here? They're doing the exact same thing. They're spending billions upon billions upon billions of dollars every day to attack our capital markets and craft narratives based on whatever talking points we see on a weekly basis. Trump turns around on Thursday and Friday of every week and changes the talking points for the next week. And then we move into the next week and they're trying to play catch up. Meanwhile, he's moved on to a different thing. Yeah. They tried to take control of the narrative last Friday when they had Moody's come in and give the downgrade. And they tried to get some operational tempo, right? And then they started that one. And then when the markets opened on Sunday night and gold didn't move a little bit, the Treasury market didn't move at all in the overnight markets in Shanghai and Tokyo and Sydney. Lo and behold, on the London Open, all of a sudden, everybody's talking about the yen carry trade. Everybody's talking about Japan is in trouble. So you attack. So what happened in the tariff tantrum on in that week after Liberation Day on April 7th, 8th, and 9th was an attack on the SOFR market. In order, and the SOFR versus the 10-year basis trade that was, they attacked that market. You can see it in the data. It's in there. Go look at a 2-hour chart of those days. You'll see insane amounts of volatility and volume. Okay. Like 10 times the normal volatility, 20 times the amount of normal volume. Someone was attacking that market. I know who it was. It wasn't the Chinese. That failed. SOFR survives that attack. Trump says, you know what? Yeah, okay, that's over and done with. I'm putting a 90-day pause on all the tariffs, and the attacks end because all the uncertainty is now gone. Now the market action can come in and stabilize things, and the attack's been blunted because now all of a sudden, these are no longer illiquid markets because people aren't worried about 145% tariffs on China. Fast forward a month. Trump's got trade deals in place with the UK, with this one, Japan. Like everybody's coming to the table. Everybody's cutting deals. Major deals are happening. Everything's calmed down. Now you got to attack again. Why? Because Europe still has the same problem. The Eurodollar system is being drained dramatically. Powell's holding interest rates at 4.5%. They're paying 25 basis points over SOFR in order to get access to liquidity. And they have to attack the bond market again. And now they can't do it through SOFR because they already tried that. So now they got to attack it through the yen carry trade. And that's what they're doing now. And
so it's a combination.
And they did that with the time. With one last point, just so you understand why they would wait until now is because there was a major vote and a major budget and tax vote happening in the Japanese Diet that Prime Minister Shiba was having to spend a lot of capital. He was involved in the deep political fight in Japan, so they timed all of this with that. And I recommend everybody, if you're interested in what's happening in Japan on a regular basis, my friend Ira Harris, his son Tobias, runs probably one of the best Substacks in the world on Japan called Understanding Japan. It's excellent. I'm a subscriber over there. It's one of the best things in the world because if you want to understand how the U.S. and Japan are a united front, like the BOJ is absolutely, I wouldn't call it a wholly owned subsidiary of the Fed, but I would call it a partner of the Fed. Unlike, for example, the SNB, the Swiss National Bank, which is absolutely a wholly owned subsidiary of Germany's Bundesbank. Just to understand the lay of the land.
Yeah. So first of all, this is absolutely fascinating to me. Just breaking it down, and what I'm understanding is essentially this is a combination of economic warfare and narrative warfare, and essentially it's essentially using the legacy systems, and I'm including legacy media in there, are being used to essentially craft a narrative, and Trump is essentially one step ahead of them by essentially flooding the zone. Like art of the deal dynamics every week. You if you're an observer, you're like, this is chaotic. He's talking about raising tariffs. He's talking about, you get a plane. They're focused on the train, the plane, and then yesterday, the meeting between him and the South African.
While they were focusing on the plane, he was doing more in the Middle East in 10 days than anybody thought could be done in 10 years.
Of course.
And notice that he didn't go to Israel during that trip.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
That's a tell, by the way, folks.
Need liquidity without having to sell your Bitcoin? For more than 6 years now, Ledn has been the trusted choice for Bitcoin-backed lending with transparency, security, and trust at their core. I absolutely love these guys, and I personally have not only an account with them, but also a loan. And some of the key features that I love about Ledn is the fact that there are no monthly payments. You pay at the end of the term. You also have the ability to roll over the loan as well, and you could pay it back whenever you want. Essentially, what they do is that they help their clients unlock the liquidity of their BTC, allowing you to HODL while still accessing the wealth of your Bitcoin. They've been battle tested with their focus on transparency, security, and trust, allowing them to build a proven track record of client success and security, helping tens of thousands of clients harness the value of their digital assets with confidence and peace of mind. Learn more about what your BTC can do for you. Check out Ledn.io today.
Is it possible for Powell to be nationalistic and simultaneously run a central bank? Isn't a central bank and inherently kind of, I posted this, multiple days ago, but I said central banking is inherently a socialistic institution.
Sure.
Is that even possible to be the chairman of a central bank and be a nationalist?
Well, sure. If it's the most powerful central bank in the world and you find yourself at war with all the other central banks who want to tear you down, and you've had a central bank that was run. Now, remember, talking about the Fed in such simplistic terms, the history of the Fed in such simplistic terms is actually not fair. Now I'm going to refer to Martin Armstrong on this. Martin Armstrong has been saying for years that, look, the original conception of the Fed, I'm no fan of this ultimately, but I am a fan of this in the current context, which is that I've got the most powerful central bank in the world, and I'm in a financial war. And I'm going to do what? I'm going to just disband my army and go fight a war with it without it? Is that what I'm going to do? Because that's what the Fed is. The Fed is the most powerful financial army, for lack of a better term, that the world has ever seen. And when it was under control of the globalists, it did a wonderful job of undermining and destroying and going to war with the United States' assets on behalf of other people. So we've never seen, I've said this to Bitcoin guys before, you've never seen in the history of Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin. This is not a rebuke of Bitcoin, but this is why I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, for example, is that you've never seen Bitcoin have to operate in an environment where the Fed was defending the dollar.
Interesting.
It's just conceptually. Bitcoin was birthed at the moment when the Fed was betraying the dollar completely. At the end of the dollar reserve standard, the coordinated central bank policy, the massive bailouts, all of it. It was happening during the LIBOR scandal and all of that stuff. So now, back this up a little bit and say to yourself, yes, could Powell be a nationalist? Well, he's an 8th generation American, kind of like Scott Bessent.
Yeah.
Powell's lineage traces back to Roanoke, Virginia in the 1600s, just the same way that Bessent traces back to the French Huguenots in South Carolina in the 1680s. These guys have been Americans.
What you're saying, though, is extremely consequential because you're basically making the case that the Fed, for the first time in its history, really, right? Because is
post-Banking Act of 1935. Yes, I will go along with that. The Banking Act of 1935 created the modern Fed.
Yeah, but before that,
that's when we got the singular Fed funds rate, not the regional rates. That's when the Fed was tasked, their charter was changed that they could intervene in the government securities market as opposed to just the corporate paper market. Remember, the original Fed was designed to be a lender of last resort in the commercial paper market, which, by the way, at that point in time was also we were the only country in the world that had a liquid commercial paper market. That's one of our superpowers. It's one of our great financial interventions.
You can make the case that essentially the Fed was used to bankroll World War I, which was a globalist cause. I mean, it was caused it was called the Progressive Era for a reason, right?
Well,
so I
you
mean,
could make
it
that
was
argument
before 1935, right?
Yes, I'm not look again. The Fed was created as a response to the panic of 1907 by what J.P. Morgan wanted. World War I, and this is now a very, very complicated conversation, because now we're getting into what did France and England do, and how much money did they borrow from the United States, what happened here, and all the rest of it. Don't get me wrong, like Woodrow Wilson was one of the worst presidents in American history. He gave us the income tax, the 17th Amendment, the League of Nations, all of that stuff. No argument. And he was a globalist. We had a whole, we're dealing with a moment in time. Again, I'm not here to defend the Federal Reserve. Okay. That's not my purpose here. My purpose here, if I have a purpose, is because you can't make singular arguments about things that happened 100 years ago and apply them today. You can't do that. That's not fair. You have to understand that history is a progression of events. And reasons why. So why those things happened at those moments in time. Creating the central bank was a terrible idea, in my opinion. Mark Armstrong happens to disagree with me. It's fine. I don't care. Like I had this discussion with Marty last weekend up in Calgary. But what I can say is I would rather the pre-1935 Fed than the Fed we have today. That's what I can say.
So
okay?
I mean, but
now let's just take it one step before you jump back in. What I mean by that is what I see happening, what I see from Scott Bessent, what I see from Donald Trump, what I see from even in many ways from Jerome Powell. Getting into the whole thing, getting into the stable and genius bills, getting into all this stuff that they're doing, is I think they're setting up a moment where we're going to get the Fed pushed back to its original conception, which is, but with the added power of regulating the offshore dollar market, access to offshore dollars, basically the cost of capital of the offshore to the Eurodollar system. But the Treasury is going to take over banking regulation. Scott Bessent's already talked about this.
Yes, I remember that.
And there's a lot of things happening from that perspective. And of course, is it being fought tooth and claw from within the Fed itself? Of course. Is Powell really fighting it? That's a good question. It's a question that Caitlin Long and I have been banding back and forth for 3 years now. And we haven't come up with a fully fleshed out answer for. And I don't have an answer for it yet. But what I can see is the following, and maybe we'll get there, which is that we are moving towards a system that, and again, like Vince Lanci and I have done a dozen podcasts on this together and whatnot, which is that we're setting up an onshore dollar and an offshore dollar system that exist at different prices. And only the Fed can enforce par domestically versus internationally. Under LIBOR, par was enforced internationally by the Eurodollar system on us. Under SOFR, which is Jerome Powell's, this is the first thing Jerome Powell did when he got into power at the FOMC in 2017, was he was confirmed. A month later, they moved John Williams out of the Atlanta Fed, the architect of SOFR, John Williams, from the Atlanta Fed to the all-powerful New York Fed. And then SOFR immediately started the pilot project and then the 5-year rollout to when it became the dead indexing rate for the entire domestic market on January 1st, 2022, which is why Joe Biden and Obama fought so damn hard to get rid of Jerome Powell, because they didn't want him to have a second term.
Gotcha.
And they fought tooth and claw, and they fought all the way to the end. And I covered this in astounding detail every freaking day. I watched this play itself out. And eventually the Fed, the FOMC board, ended the bullshit, for lack of a better term. And they did so by voting him chair until reconfirmation, meaning his term ended and then he was still chair until the Senate reconfirmed him. At that point, Biden and company were out of moves. They had to throw him up for Senate confirmation. He passes with 80 votes. That's February 22nd, 23rd, 2022. The next Fed meeting starts raising rates.
Yeah. Well, I'm loving this conversation, because I usually talk to Bitcoiners, and this perspective is is a very unique one. It's a very interesting one, which is essentially you make the case that the Fed has been acting as a globalist institution since 1935, and for the
And
first
maybe
time in
earlier than that, but I don't. My understanding of the Fed's actions previous to that are limited. Just to be
Gotcha.
fair.
And then I make the case since its inception, but right, this is where we were. But you're saying your understanding since 1935, and essentially you're making the case that right now, this is kind of the first time in American history where we have a Treasury Secretary and the chair of the Fed that are nationalistic. So instead of the Fed acting against American interests, the average everyday American acting against them, the Fed is now going to be acting for them, and we've never seen that. As a
Okay, well,
Bitcoiner, what I would
let's just
say as a
okay. Well,
Bitcoiner, what I would say is,
okay.
yeah,
When I just want to amend that carefully. What I'm telling you is that the Fed's job is to protect the American banking system and to protect the American Treasury market. That's its real dual mandate. Now, the Davos agenda, the globalist agenda, is to do away with individual central banks and go to a global central bank. It's to do away with commercial banking. Classic commercial net interest margin banking goes away. Central bank digital currencies. We don't need commercial banks. You go and get your money directly from the central bank.
gotcha.
Powell stated unequivocally no CBDC in the United States of the type and kind that Christine Lagarde is talking about. A retail level CBDC, programmable, expirable, all of that. Minority Report with more Germans is the way I like to put it. Okay. Like, seriously, like that is not so. The Fed's incentives, you don't have to look at the Fed as a good guy. You need to look at who the Fed works for and who they're trying to defend. And the WEF agenda is anathema to Wall Street, to commercial banking, period.
Yeah.
And why would you expect the Fed to roll over and play dead? They did. Well, okay. So if Trump's first administration was a Goldman Sachs administration, which it was, I have to amend your statement previously. This is the first tandem of a quote unquote nationalist Treasury Secretary, Fed chairman. No, I have to put Steve Mnuchin on the side of, I hate to do it because it makes me feel really dirty to say this, the side of the quote unquote angels here. They were working together in tandem in that respect. They had to be. And they understood that it was very early in the game and that you've got to change the system out over time. It's not something you can just move to overnight. You can't go from LIBOR to SOFR in 6 months. The market would have rejected it. It would have never worked. It had to be rolled out slowly and in the proper manner to move the American economy and the American financial system onto and get it prepped for SOFR and indexed to SOFR. And that took 5 years. And so what do we have in the end of Trump's first term? COVID.
Yeah.
And we have an attack on the American, we have an attack on the system when it was still in pilot program.
Hmm.
The repo crisis of September 2019, which then morphs into March 2020, where the Fed had to come in. They had to shut down the global economy and turn the Treasury market bidless. What did Powell do? He had to cut rate. He had to go back to the zero bound.
Mm-hmm.
They tried that again a month ago. And they failed. They tried it in March of 2023, and the fucking guy raised interest rates in the middle of the biggest banking crisis since 2008. He raised interest rates while Silvergate Bank was imploding, while Credit Suisse was imploding, and he raised another 25 basis points. Janet Yellen was furious. She winds up going to China. She wants all sorts. I mean, it was insane. It was awesome. I'm like, how am I supposed to not respect that? Because the downstream effect of that is that now we have people now we have the foundation built to gain our monetary independence in the United States for the first time in our entire freaking history, because we've always been tied to Europe because of the trade flows. We've always been tied to Europe because of the central banks. We've always been tied to Europe directly because of trade flows. And the longer I've been working on, I've been watching this play out, the more I've delved into the history of this. And I've looked at the history of America, their trade deficit, our trade deficit versus surplus with Europe over our period. I've looked at it. I've looked at the way the monolithic Fed, the singular Fed funds rate pushed capital into California at the expense of the heartland of America. I've looked at it from all of these perspectives, and it all tracks with this is a system that was designed politically and monetarily and from a regulatory perspective in order to suck all the wealth out of the United States and transfer it back to the homeland. The U.S. Civil War, World War I, World War II, Dawes bonds, this, all of it. The War of 1812 and setting Canada up as our Pakistan, right? I mean, Canada's whole history has been a financial antipode to the United States, financial and political antipode to the United States, the whole Greater Toronto area. Like, they've been the Crown's / Europe, depending on how you want to look at it, been their outpost for years. And the Canadian banks have been involved, and I firmly believe they've been involved in so much of the money laundering, drug money laundering, the now working with the Chinese to liquefy the fentanyl trade, all of this stuff. Trump is not wrong about any of this shit. Like, not any of it. And so the problem for Bitcoiners is they become so focused on the advantages of Bitcoin and what Bitcoin could potentially represent that they're missing the big story that's happening around them and how Bitcoin actually plays. Bitcoin's real value is that it's the 21st century equivalent of a bearer bond that's liquid and movable to create 100% pristine collateral that can move around the world and be used to liquefy and collateralize a new financial system. Not be the financial system, be the collateral asset of it.
Mm-hmm. Now,
and let the world figure out how to integrate that on its own over time. So I get yelled at all the time. I'm not a Bitcoiner. I'm like, fuck you, I'm probably the biggest Bitcoiner because I understand the plumbing on top of it. It's crazy.
This is fascinating. I'm enjoying this, the historical context. You've clearly spent a lot of time looking into this. I love how you tied in Canada, by the way, because it kind of opens your eyes a little bit in terms of the connection to Europe. Again, they technically still have the queen, right? Or sorry, the king. I apologize. So
Charles's case, it's kind of,
yeah, okay. But my point is this, right? And I think this is coming from a Bitcoiner's perspective. So the Fed is acting in the national interest of the United States. It's essentially cutting ties with Europe. My counter as a Bitcoiner would say, we're just 1 or 2 elections away from all of that being reversed.
Possibly.
So what would be better? Would we be better off without a central banking title, which is what Bitcoiners want, or but again, it comes with tremendous power.
I have to ask you a very simple question. Ready?
I want to give a shout out to our partner, sat123.com. Sovereignty isn't just about your money. It's about your communications too. When the grid goes down, most people go dark. Cell towers fail in hurricanes, cyber attacks, and blackouts. But satellite phones, they don't rely on local infrastructure. Iridium has 77 satellites in orbit, giving you a direct line anywhere in the US, even offshore. If you hold your own Bitcoin keys, you should hold your own comms too. Sat123.com also has everything you need to start building your Bitcoin citadel. Starlink, battery backups, Faraday bags to protect your hardware wallets, and much, much more. It's a one-stop shop for anyone serious about resilience and off-grid independence. Stay connected, stay independent, stay sovereign. Go to sat123.com/simply today and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the store.
How many guns do you own? How much ammo do you have? Well, a couple of questions. And how many cans of sardines do you have?
I live in Florida, so a lot.
Good. So do I. But here's the thing. Florida's also inhospitable without air conditioning, which is why I'm moving to Tennessee. I will stand by my arguments, but I also hedge my bets, folks. I'm not stupid. Now, I live in North Central Florida, so I live in truly inhospitable climes. I live in the swamps of North Central Florida. I look out my window, I see temperate rainforest and swamp. It's crazy. My point, but here's the thing. That's not going to happen. And the reason that's not going to happen is because there's two things. One, the pace at which Trump is operating right now, and you've seen the pace, that pace is so fast, and he understands exactly what needs to be done. And he's made it clear who the enemy is, and it's not China, and it ain't the Russians, and it ain't Israel. Well, depending on your definition of Davos, how inclusive you want to make that, it's Europe. They're the ones that have fought him tooth and claw. China doesn't fight him. The Russians don't fight him. The Europeans fight him on everything. They don't have any collateral. You still need physical collateral in this world. I don't give a shit how much you love Bitcoin. At the end of the day, the Bitcoin network runs on oil, gas, nuclear, solar, whatever you want to call it. It runs on energy. You need the physical collateral. You need the energy collateral. You need the copper. You need the rare earths. You need it all, right? You need the silver. You need all that stuff
To build the miners and power the miners.
Without any of the physical collateral. And guess who doesn't have it? Europe. What is Trump doing? Cutting them off from all forms of physical collateral. He's taking control of Ukraine, trying to end the war, keep Russia from being destroyed by globalists. He's just cut $100 trillion worth of deals all across the Gulf states and elevated them to partner status, economic partner status with the United States, not Europe. He's trying to bring Iran in from the cold in order to secure all of the international North-South transport corridor for Russia and Belt and Road for China. And put Iran where it should be, at the crossroads of East-West and North-South trade globally. He wants Canada. He wants Greenland, and he wants the Panama Canal. Okay, ask yourself, and then, moreover, he's making deals with Italy. Very important. He is moving war and military material out of Europe, out of Germany, out of Poland, and moving it to Greece. He's blessed Turkey's takeover of Syria. Spain and the other one, Portugal, are both making deals to reshore and to make deals with putting businesses in the United States. He is setting up rump Europe so that France, Germany, and their satellites have no access to anything. So while the Brits have spent 300 years trying to take over the Black Sea is now a Russian lake. They did the NATO expansion under Biden in order to try and bottle Russia up and take the that's not the Barents Sea. It's the other. I can never remember the Baltic Sea away from them. And what's happening now? The Russians are seizing Estonian ships and saying, "No, you can't trade. It's our lake, not yours." If the Europeans lose all access to hard collateral, they lose the northern coast of the Mediterranean. France has already lost the Sahel region of Africa, where they were running the colonial CFA franc and destroying all those people. Like now, Spain and Portugal, The big one is getting control of the island, known as the England. And that means you need to kill City of London. Not London, City of London. I don't know what's going on with the Vatican, but we now have an American Pope. I don't know how to read that yet. Ain't got there yet. But my geopolitical read is that Trump is literally, he's setting up Rump Ukraine. Transcarpathia is going to, just like I said at the beginning of the war, Transcarpathia is going to go back to the Hungarians. The Poles are going to get Lvov. I don't know if Donald Tusk, they've got Donald Tusk installed in Poland in order to try and stop that from happening. We'll see how that plays out. You got the Americans are going in, they want to buy Nord Stream.
Yeah.
Why would they want to buy Nord Stream?
To, again, take away the collateral.
It's even better than that. It's to use the Europeans' own third energy package against them.
Yeah.
Because what created all the controversy over why Nord Stream 2 took so freaking long to build was because the Poles stood in the way of it, and they passed the third energy package, which stopped South Stream, and then Gazprom had to unbundle. That's the important part here. Unbundle the gas from the pipeline, so the same company could know both the gas and the pipeline. So
Tom,
now the Americans are going to own the pipeline, and the Russians are going to pipe the gas, and they control the price going to Germany.
So Tom, let me ask you something. Hold on.
It's hilarious.
I wish I would have had you on the show a lot sooner, because I think as Bitcoiners, we're in somewhat of an echo chamber, and I love having different perspectives, because it's like you love Bitcoin, but you're also paying attention to the geopolitics of it all. And I'm hearing a bunch of different things that I've never heard before, and it's absolutely fascinating. I'm learning a ton. Now, my question to you is, why are we sold as, like, the general public is sold, which I actually feel like an idiot saying this, but the general, okay, now that that social media is a thing, and X, and people are starting to think critically and do their own research and blah, but the theory, is basically like Europe is an ally of the United States, Russia's a boogeyman, China's a boogeyman. That's the theory. Now, of course, if you've been paying attention to X, you're like, no, Europe hasn't been, specifically not Europe, but Brussels has been acting extremely antagonistic against the US, if you ever been paying attention. But the public is still sold on the World War II model, right? They're still sold on, NATO, and, we need this union, we need this,
Because they control our media, because they control the undead media. I don't call them the legacy media anymore. They're the undead media.
At this point, yes, 100%, 100%.
So, you're right, and we still have a lot of boomers who are still alive. I hate that's the problem. They still watch. It's like the age old adage. Like, I'm just chatting with my partner Dexter White, as partner of Gold Ghosts and Guns, Dexter White, this morning, and so we recorded a podcast this morning, and then we got done, and in the after comments, as we were getting finished, we were talking about the media a little bit, and I said, so I guess it still applies, you just kill your television. And he just laughed, because he had that bumper sticker on the back of his BMW when we were in college together. I'm like, yeah, kill your television. He's like, yeah, my North Star has not changed in 40 years. I'm like, mine either. Okay, so that's where we are. Like, what are you going to do? And don't get me wrong, like I have a lot of antipathy for boomers, but boomers as a philosophical construct. The better way of putting it is spiritual boomerism.
Yes.
Right. That there's this
Wall Street Journal, New York Times, CNN, CNBC. That is the all be all.
It's
credentialism.
Yes,
credentialism, and then it enforces the globalist model, right?
Yeah, it enforces that model. They've always owned the media.
Yes,
they have between a combination of London and Brussels and whatnot. They've always controlled the media. We had intelligence service control over our media here in the United States.
Absolutely, 100%.
Going back to the formation of the original three big networks, like.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that was during FDR. It was on purpose. It was during World War II.
Yeah, it was done on purpose. And hold on for just a second. Okay, cool. I got my other show pushed back to half an
No,
hour.
no,
So
no.
got about-
I literally have 5 minutes, so we're
cool.
yeah.
That's great. I need to find another cigar and go pee and stuff. So we're good. No, you're absolutely right. And those, and you have to understand that this is why I just say it's really simple, guys. They're just commies. Comintern never ended. It's always been versions of the same thing.
Yes.
And you're watching it happen in the EU now. It's the EU SSR. I coined that phrase back in 2013 when I first started writing for Newsmax. I remember getting a note back from my editor when I called the EU the Fourth Reich, and they just were like, "You can't say that." Like, I'm like, what do you mean I can't say that? It's true. And they're like, because I was talking about Germany using Nord Stream 2 to enforce energy policy across Europe by controlling the inflow of gas to Europe. They were going to use Nord Stream 2 to enforce political control.
It is 100% communism. I
it is,
100%
absolutely.
agree.
course.
They rebranded it, of course. Went from class warfare to more cultural warfare.
Yes. Agreed.
But it is 100% Marxism. I actually tweeted this 3 or 4 weeks ago. I said, what Bitcoiners fail to understand is that, one of the Bitcoin's biggest enemies is communism, and people believe it's been defeated, and that's not the case at all. It's just rebranded, and it's alive and well, and it exists.
It is
100%.
It is, and the fear over CBDCs and all the rest of that's all real, and there's no reason for the United States to ever go to that level. I pointed at the Bitcoiners in the past, and I'll continue to do it. Go back and look at Powell's Humphrey Hawkins testimonies. He said things like, "There's more room in the world for more than one reserve currency." There will never.
I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember
he
that.
doesn't have any antipathy to Bitcoin. There's a reason for that. It's because Tether and Bitcoin together form a hot sink for the T-bill market. Like,
Yes.
what do you think is, and Tether's only been upgraded over and over and over again. Now we're bringing Ripple into the fold, the Ripple Labs and XRP, to do away with City of London's massive advantage in Forex. Like their comparative advantage is they still settle 30% of the world's Forex, and the British pound is literally going to be replaced by XRP. And I note last week that City of London was trying to get out from underneath that by upgrading USD coin, and Ripple was like, "No, we'll buy that."
Yeah.
And we'll buy that. I'm like, yeah, and it's clear. And again, I'm not here to shill Ripple. I'm saying Ripple does one thing. Bitcoin does something different. Bitcoin is a reserve asset and a collateral asset. Ripple is a Forex liquidity token. It's a different thing. They can work in tandem together, honestly, to break City of London and to break Brussels. And they're part of the thing. The stablecoin bill getting passed. I'm watching Elizabeth Warren crying her beer. One of the most satisfying bits of Schadenfreude I've had in quite a long time.
It was great.
It was glorious, dude. It was so
and
great.
her watching her on the floor like this, like making it was definitely a big victory. Tom, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. We most definitely have to do a part 2. Caitlin's been on the show many times, so maybe we do a Tom and Caitlin combo for part 2, which would be, I think, phenomenal. It's been an honor.
To be honest, Caitlin and I together is already almost too much. I can barely contain it during when I love Caitlin Long, but when I have her on my podcast, we almost can't keep up with each other. Like I think it would actually not be great content simply because we're both so high energy that we can't. You won't get a word in edgewise. You'll say hi, Colin, hi, Caitlin, and then an hour and a half later we'll hit stop, and then it'll be over. And if you're comfortable with that, then we can do it. But
that sounds like a great idea. Anyways, Tom, it's been an honor. It's been an honor. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You've enlightened me today with these different perspectives, and you've left me with a lot to think about. So, Tom, thank you so much for joining me.
Mission accomplished. Thank you.